Let's talk about something that can feel like a researcher's worst nightmare, a publication retraction. I know, it sounds terrifying, but it doesn't have to be a career ender. In fact, what we're going to do today is lay out a practical guide for navigating one of academic life's biggest challenges and maybe even coming out stronger on the other side. Okay, first things first, let's get one thing straight. This isn't some super rare, isolated event that happens to just a few people. If you look at the data from the last couple of decades, there's been a really significant rise in retractions. It's becoming a more common part of the scientific landscape, partly because, well, we're just getting better at spotting errors and holding ourselves accountable. So, what is a retraction, really? At its heart, it's a tool for self-correction. The whole point isn't to punish anyone. It's to protect the integrity of the scientific record. Think of it like this. The community is saying, whoa, hold on, this part of the map we've all been using is wrong. Let's fix it so no one gets lost. The key thing to understand is the massive difference between an honest mistake and deliberate misconduct. To help make sense of all this, we've got a bit of a roadmap. We'll start with a reality of the situation, then talk about what to do the moment you find an error. From there, we'll walk through what an investigation actually looks like, peek into life after a retraction, and super importantly, we'll finish up with how to prevent this from happening in the first place. First up, facing an error. Let's talk about that heart-stopping, stomach-dropping moment when you realize, oh no, something is wrong with my published paper. This is such a critical point, and believe me, what you do next matters a lot. Your first instinct is probably going to be pure panic, and that's totally normal. Researchers who've been through this all talk about the huge amount of stress and anxiety, but the key is to take a breath and channel that energy, because your very first move here is absolutely crucial. You're essentially at a fork in the road. On one path, if you've found an honest-to-goodness error, you can proactively get in touch with the journal yourself and start the process of a correction or even a self-retraction. The other path, which is usually for cases of alleged misconduct, is an investigation started by someone else. The first path, that puts you in the driver's seat. This quote from an author who went through this, it just captures the whole ethical dilemma perfectly. It wasn't about saving face for them. It was about a duty to the rest of the scientific community. It was about a responsibility to make sure no one else builds their own work on a foundation that you know is flawed. In fact, some researchers are starting to call this the heroic act of science. When an author finds a mistake on their own and steps up to report it, they're actively choosing integrity over just staying silent and hoping no one notices. It completely reframes the whole thing. It's not an act of failure. It's an act of profound scientific courage. Okay, now for our next section, the investigation. So what happens if one gets launched? I know, the whole idea can be super intimidating, but knowing the steps, understanding your rights, and knowing where to get help, that can make all the difference. So here's how it usually plays out. It all kicks off with a formal, written notification about the allegations. Then comes the review by your institution. You'll get a chance to see all the evidence, and this is critical, you get to submit your own response. Finally, you should be able to review the final report before it goes public. See? Breaking it down makes it feel a bit more manageable, right? Through this whole process, please remember this: you are not alone. So the big question is, where can you turn for help? Because trying to navigate this process without any support is incredibly tough, and you really shouldn't have to. This is a great example of the kinds of support systems that might be available. A lot of institutions are setting up things like research integrity help desks. They can offer confidential advice on tricky stuff like authorship disputes or data problems. They can even help with mediation or, and this is so valuable, connect you with a peer mentor who has actually been through something similar. Now, this is so important. You have rights in this process. You have the right to get a clear, plain language explanation of what you're being accused of. You have the right to a fair and timely process. You absolutely have the right to respond to the evidence. And you have the right to an advisor and to review that final report. Knowing these rights helps you advocate for yourself. And that brings us to the big one, the question that's probably on everyone's mind. Is a retraction a career ender? Is it all over? Let's take a look at what the evidence actually says. First off, let's just acknowledge that fear. It's real, and it is completely universal. In one study of authors who self-retracted their work, literally every single one of them was worried about their reputation and their career. It is a totally rational concern. But is it always justified?
This is where the data gets fascinating. Studies on citation patterns have found something called a retraction penalty. And here's the deal. Papers that are pulled for misconduct, yeah, they see a big drop in citations to the author's other work. But, and this is a huge but, in cases where an author retracts their own paper for an honest error, studies find no significant loss in citations. The community can tell the difference.
And if you need an anecdote to go with the data, check this out. It's so powerful. An author who self-retracted was, of course, really nervous submitting her next paper. But one of the peer reviewers literally wrote that the retraction showed she was precise and considerate. The act wasn't seen as a failure. It was seen as proof of her integrity. It can actually boost your reputation. How about that? All right, this leads us to what is maybe the most important section of all: prevention. How can we build habits and systems that help us avoid this whole situation in the first place? It really is all about being proactive. If you look at the data for why papers get retracted, you start to see some clear patterns. The biggest slices of this pie are things like plagiarism and duplicate publication, with misconduct and authorship fights right behind. But you know what? A lot of this stuff is entirely preventable if we just have better practices. So here's a practical checklist you can start using today. 1. Set up clear authorship agreements right at the beginning of a project. 2. Have transparent data management practices. 3. Run your paper through plagiarism software before you hit submit. 4. And this one is a big one for lab culture: make it safe for people to talk about mistakes. And 5. Actively go find a mentor to talk about publication ethics. So we'll end on this thought. For decades, a retraction was just seen as a total failure, a black mark on a career. But maybe we should see it differently. Maybe when scientists themselves find and fix their own mistakes, it isn't proof that science is broken. Maybe it's proof that the self-correcting engine at the very heart of science is working exactly as it's supposed to.